empower, advocate, and respond to our children's needs in pandemic education. And so tonight we are excited to have as our guest presenters Dr. Diane Reese, who is a scholar practitioner. She is a counselor educator. She is a experienced school counselor practitioner with a wealth of experience directing school counseling programs in the state of Virginia. And currently she is an assistant professor of counseling at Trinity Washington University. And I'm proud to say that I retired from Trinity Washington University a year ago, and Dr. Reese was and is such an amazing contributor and helped us to achieve the CACREP school counselor accreditation, as well as the clinical mental health counselor accreditation. So this is someone who will be sharing her experience and experiences of not just working as a school counselor, but she also is supporting and helping to train school counselors and trainees. Dr. Diane Reese is a graduate with a doctorate from George Washington University in counselor education and supervision. She also is has the credential of approved counselor supervisor, which is an advanced level credential to be able to supervise school counselors and school counselor practitioner candidates. She also was nominated and ran and was elected to the American School Counselor Association Board, which means that her peers have voted her in to represent school counselors across the United States. And so we're very excited and want to thank you, Dr. Reese. Our second speaker,
thank you. Good evening.
You're welcome, is Mr. Wayne Cole, and we're excited to have Mr. Cole. He is a school counselor at the high school level for City College, which is actually his alumni. He graduated from City College. He is a product of Catholic school, but attended City College, and he went on to get his bachelor's degree from Stevenson University in Maryland, and he received his master's of school counseling degree from Loyola University in Maryland. And he was hired to work as a school counselor at City College. So I think the two of them are going to share their experiences. And we also want to provide an opportunity for you all to ask questions. So as we're in this presentation for the next hour, we ask you just to type in your questions and we'll be entertaining your questions. We'll also have an opportunity at the end, about 10 minutes to the end, to have a Q&A as well. So I would like to just start and ask our presenters to respond to the first question is, in your experience, how has the COVID-19 pandemic education affected students and what challenges do you see?
I'm going to yield to Mr. Cole since he's actively in the school, and then I'll kind of follow up with, what I have experienced with his colleagues.
Okay, thank you.
So Dr. Haskins, to answer your question, the main thing we've been seeing is internet difficulty, whether that's access, internet speed, computer accessibility as well. Another thing has been kids who don't have access to a computer are using their phone. Which is good, but it really puts them at a disadvantage because the screen size is smaller. It's easy to make typos, like neck position, just having your fingers in that all the little stuff. So that's have been one of the hurdles is internet accessibility. Kids having to go to, let's say, like a McDonald's hotspot or siphoning internet from maybe like a Verizon store or going to almost dangerous, lengths just to get, access to material. So that has been a challenge. Or as I was telling Dr. Reese, we have a situation not just within our school, but maybe one laptop to a house that has maybe 3 or 4 kids in the school. So some kids, you might get it Monday, then you have to give your sister Tuesday, and now you may have back-to-back assignments, and then you're missing out on instruction. So that's been one of the biggest hurdles, I would say, so far, has definitely been the internet access or availability of technology.
Okay. And thank you for speaking to that, because one of the questions, the reason I asked this question, and it'd be interesting to hear from what Dr. Reese is noticing also as she's supervising trainees in the schools, because there's an assumption that everyone has the privilege of having devices and equipment, and even to have the ability to access internet capability. And the reality is that we have a lot of families who are just managing. Many of them, because of the pandemic, are unemployed now. If they were already not making a livable wage, they're even more challenged now. And so because of the impact of income, they aren't able to maintain some of the extras, such as having internet or cable. And some families have never had that because they just they can't afford it. And so that has been a real concern, and I'm glad that you spoke to that. And I wonder how the school systems are going to address that. So thank you, Mr. Cole. So Dr. Reese, in your experience, as well as, you're supervising trainees who are placed at schools also, and from your position of representing the American School Counseling Association, you have sort of a large view as well with this concern.
Yes, and I can tell you, Mr. Cole is absolutely right. I think what this pandemic did is pull the covers off of what has been happening in American education that we don't want to talk about, or that we really knew about, and that was about equity, access, and especially the technology. And we sort of keep going along in life doing what we do, knowing that these things, but when you have this kind of widespread issue that impacts education so profoundly for so many students, you can't help but it's right in your face, because now you got to figure out, how are we going to educate all these children? And so I heard school counselors who live in rural areas were extremely concerned about how their students, that they were going to get left behind. You heard about the very issue that Mr. Cole spoke about in families. I mean, even to the point that you had even school personnel in terms of, in this virtual environment. Now I've got to do my job, but I have a child also that I've got to manage, who needs to be on line with the teacher, and I'm going to do. I know a counselor that I provide supervision. She's a practicing counselor. She was stressed out. I mean, she was literally stressed out. And she called often, as I told her to call often. And she said, I have 2 little ones at home. She was in a Zoom meeting at 8 o'clock. She was in a Zoom meeting at 10. Her husband is an educator. She had a daughter that was kindergarten and another one that was pre-K. She had to be on for her daughter kindergarten. She had a Zoom meeting at 1. And she was trying to tell at least the director and other people at school, hey, I'm still expected to be with my child on this. So when you're talking about how this affected everyone, it was profound. I think it told us a story that we knew about, and a part that we just did nothing about when we were face to face. But given this magnitude, that we had to do something about. And I think that even when schools rushed out to provide computers, laptops, then here comes the issue that they don't have access to Wi-Fi. So you gave them the instrument, but they didn't have access. And so, and some students, because I don't think we prepared them to be in a virtual world. I mean, we always think just because our kids are doing Facebook or TikTok or all those things, we think that, okay, they're real sad. But when we're talking about putting them in an environment like this, it is vastly different.
Oh, yeah.
And so some of our kids didn't even show up. They didn't show up for what various reasons. And I think, at least I hope that we learn from those moments why our kids didn't show up on the screen. And how do we, going into this next school year, how do we deal with that so that we can maximize the opportunity of instruction for every child?
So thank you, Dr. Reese, because that's a lot of important information that your awareness and consciousness that you're highlighting, and Mr. Cole. But can you say a little bit more about, are there other reasons why, like say more about why kids aren't showing up? I know my neighbor is a dancer and a dance certified teacher in the school system and teaches dance. And she had said to me that she doesn't know what the students are doing. She said when she has the class, she doesn't see them. She can see they don't even have the webcam on, and she's not quite sure what's going on. So I wonder, what are some of the reasons why the kids aren't showing up? Like, as you're saying, they're not comfortable, but can you say a little bit more about help us understand that more?
You can go ahead, Mr. Cole.
Okay. I still have a little, what you want to call it, like a group of counselors where we, discuss ideas, self-help, or just keep everyone in the loop. Some issues I've heard are maybe like the situation in the house, maybe someone you don't want, kind of peering into your surroundings has been one. With self-image, some people were like, well, I don't want to be seen on screen. Some I just don't want to cut it on. That's usual. I've even heard people say, well, I can't log on to school because I have to pick up a job now in order to support family. So that's been not just a Maryland issue, that's been a globe, our country issue, that kids have to choose between now either school or work to foot the bills to help the family. That's been another domino effect of the pandemic. It's been, do I get my education or do I help towards the bills? Those have been some of the major points I've seen of why some kids are not logging in to the sessions.
Thank you.
And I agree. I mean, those have been the conversations, and aside from kids who just don't show up. But they do have some things. So the pandemic just didn't affect the education that we had to pivot and do this. Parents lost their jobs, and it made it difficult. And even parents who still had their jobs, they still, like Mr. Cole mentioned earlier, if you only have one, computer, laptop, whatever that is in the home, then that parent had to have access to that as well. And so that may have been a major factor. If you have a 8 to 5 job, and depending on what your job entail, that child may not have been able to access, the instructional time. And so I think that that's why I say I hope that we've learned some lessons. What were some of the things of why our kids didn't show up, and if they didn't show up a lot, why, so that we can mitigate some of those things this time around.
All right, thank you. So my next question is then, considering all that, what you're talking about, a lot of concerns and issues that are impacting the family, not just the education isn't always a priority. It's they're trying to eat, feed their family, stay housed, whatever the case may be. There could be family health issues. There's a host of issues. And then I'm also concerned about youth that have special education needs. And I know that Dr. Reese has highlighted that in a recent article that she's authored. So my second question is, how can parents and caregivers empower their children during the virtual education in alternative formats? And it's also, how can parents and caregivers empower themselves? I guess I should say that first, How can they empower themselves, but then how can they empower their children to participate in this new experience that we still don't know how it's going to evolve, because it could be that they're starting school virtually, but then at a certain point, if things improve, that they may re-enter the school system environment. I saw recently Baltimore City teachers, some teachers are saying that they want to teach in the school, even without their kids, because they said that it's hard for them to instruct, as you were pointing out, at home. So that's an issue that now the school system is trying to figure out, okay, how can the teachers be empowered to provide good instruction? So I wanted to start with that second question about empowerment for parents and caregivers.
Well, what comes to mind for me is, sometimes we hear news as parents or whoever, and we may tell somebody else, and we tell them what we heard, and we may not tell them everything. And one of the things that I would say to parents, caregivers, make sure you're listening. If they're setting up webinars, if they're setting up town halls, if anything, and if you have the time, especially, get your information firsthand. And if you cannot, then look on the district's website. They have plans. Read through those plans and make sure you understand so that you can ask all the important questions that you need to ask as they may impact your child. I think I would start with that. First, being informed of how, whatever their plan is to, if it's going to be all virtual, if you're going to pivot at the, after the winter break, however that is, because how you set your youngster up for virtual or on home learning, however that happens the first of the year, will determine how prepared they are to pivot to go back to a classroom or to continue on. And I think, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to let Mr. Cole tell you why I feel as strongly as I do. If you don't have a relationship with your school counselor, this is a good time to have one. And I'll let Mr. Cole tell you why I feel so strongly about that.
All right, thank you.
At going on to Dr. Reese's point, the main thing now is staying connected. But before I touch on that, I would just want to say, when we're in uncertain times. So the first thing is listening more and more collaborative. So we had to, it's slow and steady to win a race. So more compassion, more understanding. Like I said, everyone, as you always hear in the commercials, we're in this together. We are literally in this together. We're all learning. No one's the expert. So it's almost going to take a village. So stay connected, especially with your school counselor. Your school counselor is almost like your best friend. They're your advocate. They're going to bat for you. And if anything, the pandemic has shown that mental health is so important. So checking in, a quick check-in. Now, one thing, text messaging, a simple, hey, how you doing? Calling, checking the website. If you have a Facebook page, some schools have gotten crafty with making Instagram. You want to be more connected more than ever. So, sometimes like, I didn't know, or, I didn't know that was coming up, or I missed this. Well, now this might be your wake-up call. Like, okay, I'll be connected from here on out. Checking robocalls, checking emails, like Dr. Reese said, checking the district website, the school's even website. I think now more than ever, we're just going to really stay connected. So it can be no more excuses. So it has to be like an all hands on deck, but also massaging it where it's like, okay, we got to take this slow. If you don't know a certain, like Zoom, for instance, maybe going on to YouTube or Googling up, hey, how does Zoom work? Or how does this program work? If you were more like a pen and paper type person, maybe just learning how to maybe use your iPad function or type in, just to give you a well-versed of, a different skill, which I would also say is, this is allowing, people to pick up a new hobby or a skill. So just use time to research and just take your time. is
Okay.
what I would
And
say.
I can tell you, Dr. Haskins, as a
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
grandmother of a child who has special needs and who had to kind of pivot when this thing, he's at 3 years old, but they started him in early childhood. So I'm very, have a compassion for parents who have students who have special needs and how that's going to look. If you have questions, you need to ask all those questions. Don't wait for them to get a plan. If your child has an IEP, ask them how the services that are written in this IEP, how they're going to continue even doing this virtual at-home learning.
Okay. That's really a good, very good question.
What is it that we, and I emphasize we, because that should be one of your main concerns. And when we say we, that means, as Mr. Cole said, we really are in this together. We really are. And so we means I'm going to do what I need to do at home. If you tell me there's something I need to do, and I want to know, school, how are we going to make that circle from school to here so that the learning opportunity continues for my child? And so you need to ask those questions. And those are the same questions that, as I support my daughter and son-in-law in asking those same questions. How is he going to continue to get this service? He has autism. I know that, he's not going to sit in a screen. What are some of the alternatives of things that we can do to make this work? And so it's going to be very important that you have information, but that you ask all the questions that you need to ask.
And I'm glad that you're highlighting this, because a couple of things that jumped out for me is that I want to go back towards is to maybe ask if you could say what are some of the questions both of you parents should be asking. That would be helpful. And then I was also thinking that yesterday I read that one of the school systems was thinking about opening up support centers in the community where they would provide that community-based additional support for children who are having difficulty with virtual education. And I thought that was very proactive. I thought that was an empowering model. Just put it in place. And if it's not happening, then parents can ask for that. Ask that happen. And so I wondered if you could maybe specify what are some questions that parents should say for their kids who don't have special ed needs, just any questions that would be helpful, but also, as you said, you gave some questions if they do have special ed needs, like that 504 plan, what's really, what did they receive and how is that going to continue?
Okay. So I would say, Dr. Haskins and Dr. Reese, in our school counseling world, we always use the word advocate. So this is the perfect time to advocate and ask for those services.
Absolutely.
The one thing that jumps off to me with uncertain times is, hey, can I have a deadline? I mean, can I have an extension, or is this flexible? Or hey, maybe can we have a set aside a time where you proofread or we go over it? I would just advocate for just having more time, being flexible. Is this flexible? What does this look like if I want to turn it in early? What happens? Is it a penalty if it's late? Because again, we have within the pandemic, maybe someone's internet could go out or they didn't have access that particular day. So you just want to cover all your bases. Like if anything, if worst case scenario happens, we just want to prepare for that before. So when if you get there, we already know the solution. So I would just say advocate. If the question, whatever question you feel is burning in your heart, don't feel shy. Don't, ask it, because
that's right.
9 times out of 10, another family somewhere is probably having that same issue. So the quicker you ask it, then the quicker that educator will be prepared and know, to have a follow-up for that. But I would definitely say advocate. And because you're the expert of your own experience.
Absolutely. So and the other thing I would say is, if when you talk about sites that people will be at, make sure you know the protocols for being there.
Okay.
Because I've heard in places like with school, when kids went to school, that if things happen, they may not have done exactly what they were supposed to do, and something happened. And so my thing is, know what the protocols are. If they set up these little specialized centers or sites, know the protocols. Ask, okay, if how often will this site be open? Are my kids required to have any of these safety checks, masks, whatever the case is? Because what you want to do is you want to protect your child and anybody else that's going there. And so it's and you want to know what the rules are, so that it provides that optimal opportunity for instruction and for the support that kids need. And I want to underscore what Mr. Cole said about advocating. If this is the time that kids self-advocacy is something that parents that your child has not done, teach them to do that, to ask all those questions. Know what teachers expect when they get on the platform, wherever they are. If you don't hear it in the first days of their talking, be prepared. Ask the question and say, what if my internet goes out? Is there any grace period here for me? What if I become ill or a family member? It may not have anything to do with COVID, but what if somebody becomes ill? Do I have a grace period? And so how about assignments? And hopefully schools, as if they didn't know this when they did it in the spring, I certainly hope now that they're just real clear on the kind and level of work in a virtual setting that you can do. And so that students, when you're on, that you're just very specific with them. I know in this Facebook community that I belong in, Black Educators Rock, they had some really great ideas as educators. And one is what Mr. Cole said, giving students some grace.
Oh, wow. Yes, I love that.
And I think that was, I just to listen to, read that conversation was just, made me feel good, because I said, at some point, we want to hold kids to a standard as adults that sometimes we don't even hold ourselves.
Right.
Absolutely. I love that.
And so it said, give yourself a break and give kids some grace, in this, because, and I think Mr. Cole said it early, we don't understand quite yet. I mean, we can see it, the social emotional toll that this takes on kids. We don't know what households have lost. Right. There are kids who are suffering with that. And even with COVID, we also still have the issue, this racism issue that we have not talked about. I mean, we're so trying to plan for COVID, that we've not talked about how do we really prepare, even for those schools who do have some hybrid how do we prepare for that, even in a virtual world? So I think, that asking as many questions as you can as parents about the kind of work, what will they be doing? What's the expectation? What's the turnaround for homework? And don't be afraid to say to a teacher, let me just say, I'm on the laptop, my husband is here, I have 2 other children, and I want to know how, if he can't get to this, what's the expectation? I think that if the question is not asked of you as a family, be very forward and tell folks, this is what's going on in my house. I mean, I would encourage parents to do that, because what you're doing is setting your child up and yourself up to have the best possible positive experience that you can have, even in this virtual setting.
Well, I'm glad that you're highlighting that. And I think, because one of the issues is that the reality is when families are struggling and they don't have the resources that they need, they don't feel good about it. They can be embarrassed about it. They may feel shame. Children feel embarrassed. They feel ashamed. That's why some of them, as you all have spoken about, may not be checking in because they may not want anyone to see what their home situation is. And so that is a concern, because the reality is, how likely is it that a parent or a caregiver or a grandmother or grandparent, it could be a relative that's actually guardian of a child. There could be a number of situations. One school system, our granddaughter, I homeschooled for her for 5 weeks. And I really felt really badly for the parents and caregivers and families that didn't necessarily, didn't have the privilege of having the time and the space to be able to homeschool, but also had the resources as well as the educational skill set to implement it. Because what happened with the pandemic is it just happened. And a lot of the school systems really didn't do a good job of sort of structuring it. And so it left caregivers in a position of having to sort of make things up as you went along or come up with some other plan, because there really wasn't a highly structured instructional experience. And I really feel badly, and I feel very concerned in terms of as an educator, from a justice perspective, of what about the families that don't have resources and the ability. So our granddaughter's school, an example of a good model, I feel, and I hope this is going to work out the way that I think it is for September 3rd, I called and I was told that they're going to have a, not orientation, it's you come in and you get all the resources you need for your child. It's going to be a drive-by, pick up resources for your student, your child. And they're going to have stations set up for that. And I said, okay, what if you need a device? That's going to be available. They're probably going to have, I'm hoping, the internet cards or whatever is needed. But then the next day, they're going to have an orientation to how the instruction is going to be by Zoom. And so my hope is that, like I said, at this one day, they're going to provide all that. But I was encouraged because I thought, well, that's great. I think that school systems, I hope, are going to do something very similar around the country, where you don't wait for a parent or guardian to say, I need help. You just put it together and have like a drive-by pickup resources, and there's no embarrassment, there's no shame. It's more, everybody is coming to get resources. So my third question is, how can parents, and you spoke about this also, so this is probably redundant, but the third question I had is, how can parents and caregivers advocate for their children's needs during virtual and alternative education this coming school year? And you've already been speaking about that. I guess if you can say a little bit more, I know Mr. Cole, if you could speak to this, and Dr. Reese, from your role as professor and supervising trainees, as well as your board leadership, school leadership, what about the situation where we have, as I said, parents and guardians who they don't know how to advocate, or a lot of things that we're saying is a nice to do in an optimal world or an optimal situation. But I'm thinking about the many situations when people are beat down. And I had said to you all at the beginning, this presentation is not just for parents and caregivers, it's for everybody, aunties, uncles, cousins, grandpops, pop-pops, mimis like me, anybody and everybody who has access to a child can be in a position to support a child. So do you have any suggestions from what you notice or what is happening for those parents, particularly who are not able to set up pods, for example. I was reading about parents who really have more material privilege who are setting up pod situations where they have, the expert coming in to help provide the additional support. But what if you don't have those means and you are in a situation where you don't even know if you have food to eat? Do you have any suggestions or resources that you can recommend?
I would say, to begin your question, Dr. Haskins, is, again, everyone just exhibiting grace and that transparency. So like you said, hey,
Okay.
we're battling hardships that it's hard enough. So you just be understanding, just show us some type of grace, and I'm looking for the word to sum it up, because that's a major point that we're getting a lot. So one thing has been, as I said, we're in this together. So with the technology has been a good thing, is, kids can do like a group FaceTime and help tutor one another. Or if you're strong in this subject, then I'll host a little Facebook group or a FaceTime group, and I'll take it from here. Or peer-to-peer is one thing we pride ourselves at our schools, is peer-to-peer mentoring and tutoring. So you go to a 10th, a 12th grader or 11th grader that may have the subject down pat, and because sometimes kids feel more comfortable going to a peer rather than an adult. So that's one thing I always, lean on your peers and lean on the ones that are strong, because again, it'll take a village. Or for the parent side, like you said, you may have people that are struggling to find food. Look at, I know they always put out updates of local food centers. I get robocalls that this school has this, for food wise. Hopefully we can call that list, so maybe some parents that are looking at this video can see that. But that's another thing. Because sometimes it's hard enough just people to get out of the bed, because it's so much to them. So
absolutely
taking every little things off your plate. But again, that advocacy, speaking up for yourself, and not feeling ashamed, because again, this hit everyone. So just being honest, like, hey, I need help. This is what's going on. And you, like I said, you're your best expert. So reaching out to a teacher or telling a counselor or anyone, like, these are the challenges we face, and this is how we could be benefited, or this is how you can help us. So telling someone your experience is the biggest piece of them understanding you too. So I would say that.
And so can I follow up with that point? Because one of the questions that issues that you all see in the schools, and Dr. Reese has been really active on a research team on adverse childhood experiences. We know that when kids go to school, oftentimes being in school, not for every school, every child in every situation, particularly students of color don't always have the best positive experiences in the schools. That's the reality too. And many of them psychologically drop out by third grade. But the school for many students is a safety place where they get supported, or they have a chance to have some peace in home situations and adversity situations, abuse, trauma, addiction, material poverty, that is a host of situations. Even in families that have material privilege, there can be dire challenges emotionally going on in those family situations. And so I'm very concerned as a clinician and as an educator about the fact that students don't have that safety place. And I just wonder, and I don't know if your school has talked about this, Mr. Cole, but I wonder, Dr. Reese, with your role as a school leader, has anybody been talking about the issue around childhood adversity and the protective factor that school provided? And now that's not available. What is happening to those kids? I don't know if you all have any experiences from the spring, the latest first part of the pandemic, you know, for children who were in these childhood adversity situations. I don't know that we're going to know what's happening to them until later on. But I just wonder about these youth.
Excuse me, but you know, Dr. Haskins, one of the things that you know, being not just only being on the board, but also in a school counseling Facebook community, which is why I love I love belonging to, because you hear the conversations. Okay. And that was probably one of the main concerns when we had to go virtual, when schools closed. Mm-hmm. You could see this long-running conversation in the school counselor community saying, I don't know how I'm gonna check on this child. Okay. Mm-hmm. Because they already had knowledge of kids who were in challenging situations before school closed. And so all they could think of is, now that they're in the space, possibly with the abuser or wherever they are, okay, you know, about the access. And so there's a lot being written and talking about articles and you know, the National Association of School Psychologists, National Association of School Social Workers, and of course school counselors, around that whole notion that their students that school was their safe haven. And so once schools had to close, they were put in situations where now no one may or may not know. And I can tell you, I just read an article just recently that the number of cases of abuse went up significantly.
I'm not surprised.
And even investigations of. And so you have that going on. And so, which could very well be another reason that you don't see kids come on the platform. Okay. And I can't echo enough what Mr. Cole said about you know, the collaborativeness of this. In most schools, you have what they call student support teams or student services, where it encompasses a school counselor, school social worker, school psychologist, a school nurse, administrators, where when you're talking about kids, that should always be ever present when you don't see it. And especially if you have history about that kid or history about that family, and that, okay, we need to do something else. They also have attendance officers in places as well, in schools, and deans and those kinds of things. And so I think it's going to be very important and imperative that if we didn't know what collaboration was and multidisciplinary teaming was, we need to know it right now, because I think it is super important that we touch base with each other, so that we're putting our hands, if not literally, that we're finding kids that we don't see, and that we are reaching out to kids that we had, you know, that we had concerns about before they left school. If nothing else but a call. I emphasize again, one, because I always used to say, and I think when I interviewed for the position at Trinity, I always said, the school counselor is the most important person in the building. And I know that because when everything goes wrong, that's what wow. They go, the school counselor, when it's not going well. Yeah. But when somebody wants to know something, go to the school counselor. Okay. And I say this in the more positive, the school counselor is the most important person in the building. Okay. Because they normally have their hand on the pulse of what's happening with kids. That's a great point. And if they don't have it on a particular kid, guess what? They know enough kids in the school who know. And so they have those relationships. And kids will come by, and if nothing else, if you're at school, they come by and they're sitting in your office and they start just chatting with you and go, do you know so-and-so? And you go, yeah, and they'll start telling you that, you know, I'm just saying, and get up and walk out. You know, that code word for you is they need help. I'm just telling you this. And so you know that you need to say something. And so I would hope that, as I've said again, that parents if you don't have a relationship, or even if you've said, well, I've never talked to the school council, they've never done anything. Well, guess what? This might be a good time to get them to do some things.
Okay, excellent point. Thank you. Thank you.
Call the school counselor, ask the question, talk to them about even, I'm going to be transparent with you. This is what's going on in my house. One of the things that I know about my colleagues in the field is they have some very compassionate people. Some of the most compassionate people that you will find. Okay. And they are some of the strongest advocates for your child. We whether we're in school or out of school. Okay. And we have a wealth of information about outside resources. One, because we have to, because we are always trying to create the best scenarios for our students so that they can thrive and survive in the places that they are. So if my thing to parents, in addition to what Mr. Cole said, certainly the peer-to-peer, and in part of the resources that he and I are going to be sharing with parents, there's going to be a checklist that I'm going to include with that.
That's wonderful. Thank you to both of you. Thank you.
Because I think that when you start looking at some of the things that you need to do, I think it's just really important. And I think, if you don't think you can connect with the administrator, if you cannot connect with the teacher, connect with the school counselor.
That's great. And so you're probably wondering why I didn't have any questions in the chat. If anyone has a question, please type into the chat. I didn't see any at this point, so that's why I kept going. And we're moving to the end, so that brings us right to a good lead in to what you and Mr. Cole will be developing. The last question is, what tips and resources can you provide so that parents and caregivers, as well as any family member who is in a relationship, all of us have relationships with young people, hopefully, how can they respond to their children's needs? So what tips and resources, as we close out tonight's informative session, can you provide so that parents and caregivers can respond to their children's needs? And maybe, Mr. Cole, if you can also, since you have supported young people currently in this last school year semester when the pandemic started, and anything that you can offer that you see was very helpful. What are some of the things that you specifically were doing to stay engaged and to help respond to the children's needs? And anything that you can share, Dr. Reese, in your role as a school leader and a school counselor supervisor, as well as a counselor educator. Thank you.
So I was sharing with Dr. Reese, it's just important as physical health is, the mental health is important as well. So one thing I did last school year that my students really loved was a focus on self-care. Because even as us as, mental health providers, if we're going to help fill others, we have to make sure our cup is full too. So that was my theme of working with the students. So with all of them, again, loving the phone, we looked up apps, mindfulness apps, guided imagery apps that just had them just sit still for 10 minutes, calm themselves. Another thing that was really, the kids really loved was yoga. We did yoga, exercise, and like I said, just self-care, like listening to your body, breathing. Okay, I feel tense here. Why is that? Okay. When X, Y, Z happened, I felt this. So teaching technique, or if I feel, I feel a little panic. Okay. Breathe. So we count it, or just hold it. I just held like a pose. Okay. So that's the one thing I would really stress. Self-care. Okay. Because when you cut on the news, it can be scary, or when you see all of this and then your mind, you just want to sometimes just focus in and be like, hey, one day at a time, one breath at a time, 1 hour at a time. So don't overload yourself with the negative stimuli. So when I start back, when we have our virtual, that's one thing I'm going to hammer out is if we're going to get through this all together, we have to make sure we're taking care of ourselves first. because if we don't do that, we can't do anything.
Okay.
And, just being open to new things. So like I said, a lot of guys were like, oh, yoga. And then I know every Tuesday they're like, oh, I can't wait to do yoga. So those little things like just being open because it's a state that has your body, like you're relaxed.
Okay.
We did a lot of like audio, like I said, so you close your eyes, you imagine you're at such and such. And then people don't realize we're such a fast-paced society that even the pandemic has made us, slow down. And when we share out, it's, wow, my mind is always on 1,000, just sitting for 10 minutes help. So just sometimes just, even for kids that may have an assignment, hold off the assignment, just, relax for 10 minutes. Sit in your thoughts. It's okay. Like it is still, that assignment will still be here. That to-do list, really want to make sure you're hammering out time to focus on your well-being. That's the one thing. If anybody doesn't get anything, take that away because you have to make sure you're good first.
Thank you.
And only you know what that is. So maybe that could be a 10-minute walk around your neighborhood.
Okay.
Sitting outside on the porch, playing with your animal, calling up a friend. You want to just do something that puts your needs first. So that's what I'm going to make sure I'm telling my students.
That's wonderful.
Put yourself first.
Yeah.
Dr. Reese, I know you have a big smile on your face because we preach self-care to our students as counselor educators and as professional counselors. And I think it's wonderful just hearing Mr. Cole talk about it because what we're doing and what you're doing is you're equipping your young people with life skills. And if we can teach them self-care while they're little, and as they move up the ladder, then hopefully they're going to grow up to be healthier adults that can withstand the tension and the challenges that come their way.
Right.
Because a lot of times I get to see them as a clinical counselor as an adult, and by that time it's so late that it's hard for people to learn coping skills because they have been using these other skills that don't really work at all, but that's all they know. And it's hard for them to change. So I think it's beautiful just hearing you talk about how you're helping your young people learn self-care at a younger age. So thank you, Mr. Cole. And Dr. Reese, any tips and resources that you want to share? And then I also want to just say that Dr. Reese, for our listening audience, Dr. Reese and Mr. Wayne Cole are going to develop a resource packet that they will be sending to us. And then we will make it available on the Christ United Methodist Church website. We will share it through our Facebook page. I'll be sharing it with LinkedIn. And so thank you so much for your willingness to do that because we're going to reach so many people that weren't able to tune in. And as you said, those materials, those resources will help them incredibly.
Yeah, I'd echo what Mr. Cole said. And parents, I would say, be the role model for that. You've got to practice self-care and let your children see you doing self-care. I can, little short story, I can remember in on one of the Facebook pages, I saw this video and it was of this dance that everybody was doing. And I looked at it and I'm a person who loves to dance. And I thought, I like that dance. And so I found out that it was a video from TikTok. And the way I heard everybody talk about TikTok, you would think that it was, it would burn your hands off if you got it or burn your eyes out and you didn't want to belong to it. So I said, well, I'm going to take a walk on the wild side. And I'm going to put the app on my phone. And I did. And when I remember I was teaching at Spring, my students, and in the school, in the internship class, the practicum class, as a matter of fact, which was funny, I was telling them about TikTok and they said, you, Dr. Reese? I said, some of the best self-care because I didn't look at it for the commentary of people. I looked at it for the dances that people were doing.
Okay.
And because I love to dance, they had little babies dancing, happy. They had, you know, little kids dancing. They had all these different kind of dancing, older people dancing, you know, people doing these dance challenges, dances that I thought, okay, I need to learn. And I thought to myself, you know, at some point I would look at that for 30 minutes in the evening.
Okay.
And it would just, I mean, it because we spend that much time looking at all the stuff on television.
Right.
Crazy. And filling our head.
Exactly.
I thought if I want to fill myself with song and dance. And so that's what I did.
Wonderful.
And I think that, you know, having, you know, finding that thing in you that excites you to do that. The other thing is we know pretty much where schools are going right now. Most of them are going virtual.
Okay.
I would say to parents and students, start to prepare yourself now, mentally and physically, for the virtual world.
Okay.
And you know, where's that space? If you didn't, because we had to do things quickly.
Okay.
And I know that. Even when we decided we weren't going on campus, I have a downstairs office, but my husband occupied that office. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do now? And so I thought, okay, I'm in my bedroom. I saw a space. I said, there's a whole big space over there that I could get me a desk. And guess what? Amazon and I became good friends, got a desk, got a lamp, got a chair, and now we got the whole setup. Right. And so, I'm prepared for that. So I would say the same to parents. If this was one of those things where the space you had to do it very hurriedly. Okay. You now have the time to try to play.
Try to figure something out.
Because this is, you know, it's going to be virtual. And if you don't, then there's some things you have to start thinking about to have the optimal opportunity for your child or children in the house. Even knowing how many children you have. I'm not going to be able to do this. This is the time to start planning so that you're not stressed out, so that your child is not stressed out, and so that they start to do those things. And in some of the resources that we're going to prepare, I said it earlier, there's a checklist that talks about all of those things. I think it's going to be very helpful to parents to look through that, to talk about how do you pair, and it is, and it's out, it's put out by the CDC, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wonderful.
Which I find, there's so much information out there that it could overwhelm you, which is why me and Mr. Cole are going to put it together for you.
Well, thank you so much.
Give you the websites so that there are particular websites. We're not going to give you 50 million. We're going to give you those that are very pertinent to you. And the CDC has a whole thing about setting up for virtual at-home learning, how you plan for it, looking at social, emotional, how you do that. It's going to talk about some of the very same things that we talked about this evening. The American School Counselors Association has been just extraordinary in putting together a lot of resources, not just for our school counselors, but for our school counselors to work with our parents in helping their kids, and especially around social emotional issues around this whole COVID-19 pandemic, around the whole race issue. And so I think that's been just super. For me as a counselor educator, they've even put together resources so that as I'm working with students who are in practicum and internship, that I train them to work alongside a counselor like Mr. Cole, because they're going to be faced with these same challenges that Mr. Cole will be faced with.
Absolutely.
So our students need to be prepared. And so these are some of the same things that what we're talking about, that I'm training students so that they would be prepared to be in that space with their site supervisor, who is a counselor, to make sure that they're being helpful with students and parents. And so, you know, the National PTA, they put together a lot of great resources. If you look on that site, it even talks to parents about if your child is a special needs child, and how you need to advocate for them and for the services. The National Association of School Psychologists, they have a plethora of information to talk about some of the very same things. So we're happy to provide those specific kind of resources so that parents will only click on this to go look and find what they need.
That's great.
That will be helpful to them as they get ready to start up this school year in the virtual world.
Okay. Well, I just want to thank Dr. Reese. I want to thank you, Dr. Diane Reese, and thank you, Mr. Wayne Cole, for being so willing and available. I mean, you could be enjoying the rest of your summer, and I hope that you will, as you prepare for the school year. And on behalf of Christ United Methodist Church and all the folks who are going to listen and be supported, we just want to thank you. And thank you for putting together the resources. And we really, really appreciate your wisdom, your time, your expertise, and your heart. Thank you so much, and wish you well, and take care.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, you as well.
Right.
Take care, everybody.
Take care. Good night, everyone.